If you've heard the phrase ADR, or Alternative Dispute Resolution, and wondered what exactly does that mean, or alternative to what, then this video is for you. Because in this video, I'm going to do a number of things. I'm going to first of all define what Alternative Dispute Resolution, or ADR, is. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what some of the processes are. And I'm going to share with you some of the examples and reasons why ADR could be better than more traditional approaches to resolving disputes. Okay, so let's get started. Let me tell you what alternative dispute resolution is, because it's a term that started in the late 1970s to refer to methods of resolving conflicts that were outside traditional court litigation. So when we say alternative, what we really mean is alternative to court, because in fact, most ADR processes, or in fact, most processes for resolving disputes, would be defined as alternative because most of the ways people resolve disputes are not going to court. Like, for example, if you have a conflict with your neighbor over noise, you usually don't go to court. You maybe have a conversation. Or if you are fighting with your sibling over where you're going to go on vacation, you usually hash it out. Sometimes the way we resolve disputes is we lump it. We just cave in. When we say ADR, or Alternative Dispute Resolution, it is really a term that developed within the legal world that now has been used more broadly. And the idea first really came to the fore in 1976. The late Frank E.A. Sander, a Harvard Law School professor, delivered a now famous address at the Pound Conference, and this address was called Varieties of Dispute Processing. Basically, what he suggested was that most of the conflicts that came before the courts were not particularly well suited to a judicial resolution. Now, I hope most of you who are watching have never found yourself in a court, but most of you probably have seen some TV programs of courts. And if it's a realistic TV program of a court, it ends up with a winner and a loser. The results are binary and not creative. But most disputes are more complicated than that. So I want to say another thing about ADR, because even though this is a relatively new term, and in the kind of American legal jurisprudence, we say ADR processes are new or experimental or innovative, truth of the matter is that in the scope of human history, there's nothing alternative about them. These ADR processes have existed for millennia. So let me talk about the basic processes that comprise ADR. And I would say the three main ones are negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. So if you've been watching this channel, you know a lot about negotiation, but just a quick thumbnail definition, right? A negotiation is any communication between two or more persons to influence or persuade. So a negotiation is a process by which two parties come together to hammer out an agreement. Maybe it's to resolve a dispute, maybe it's to cut a deal. Mediation, and there's a lot of videos on mediation on this channel as well, but mediation is really a process where two or more parties come together to resolve or negotiate a conflict. But here's the difference: with the help of a third-party mediator, with the help of somebody who is trained to assist the parties in resolving their conflict. And in most mediations, the mediator strives to be neutral, meaning that their job is not to take a side. And mediators can never force a decision, but their job is to facilitate a conversation so that the parties can come up with their own resolution. And we see mediation both in court processes, but we also see mediation that occurs in schools or in workplaces and sometimes in families, right? I suspect many of you informally in your own personal relationships might have acted as a mediator. And the third process is arbitration. So arbitration is a process where a third party called an arbitrator actually does render a decision on the merits of the claim between the parties, but it's done outside of courts. My interests and my research and my teaching have been on negotiation and mediation and other kinds of processes and not so much arbitration, mostly because to me arbitration is really like a private court. So this leads me to the next important point, which is that negotiation, mediation, and arbitration are traditional ADR processes. But in fact, there's a whole range of other ADR processes, things like restorative circles or conciliation. One might even call a traditional New England town meeting an ADR process. And in fact, there are a lot of really famous examples of ADR processes that work significantly better than what a court could do. So I'll give you an example or two. After 9/11, there was a real worry that thousands of families would sue the airlines, alleging that the airlines did not take adequate measures to keep passengers safe. And the worry is that if you had thousands of families suing the airlines, a number of really bad things would happen. One, the airlines would go bankrupt. Two, it would completely clog the court system. And three, it would take so long to resolve these issues that literally years and years would go on and the families would never have any resolution. And so what the Congress did is it passed, and it was the only time in American history this has happened, it passed a compensation bill. And it said that if individual families choose to go through this ADR process to resolve their claim, instead of using the court process, the United States government will pay for the claim. And bill didn't do was define what the process should be. Instead, it allowed for the appointment of someone called a special master. And that special master was someone called Ken Feinberg. And so Ken Feinberg was charged with designing an innovative procedure that would issue compensation payments to each of the families that lost a loved one in 9/11. And the system that he designed literally resulted in almost 100% of the families choosing the payout from the federal government instead of going to court. And the process was so innovative that in fact Ken Feinberg has been called upon to resolve similar kinds of mass conflicts and disputes outside of the court system. So for example, those of you may remember the shootings at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. Ken Feinberg designed and implemented a dispute resolution system for that. Or some of you may remember the priest abuse crisis that occurred throughout many Roman Catholic dioceses in the United States. Well, Ken Feinberg was hired by the Archdiocese of New York to help design a system that resolved the claims from those victims. So one of the real advantages of ADR is that it allows for innovative ways of resolving disputes that don't cost as much, that are more efficient, and that usually give the parties a lot more autonomy and a lot more decision-making in whether or not they should agree. Now, I want to be clear. ADR processes are not always better. I would say, as an advocate of ADR processes, that almost always an ADR process is a better way to resolve disputes because it allows for creativity, because it's more efficient, because it allows parties to decide whether or not they want to say yes. But in some situations, a court might be better, and particularly when a fundamental right is at stake, a court might be better. Why is that the case? Well, because when a fundamental right is at stake, a court can make a decision that then sets a new standard for the entire society. So I'm going to give you two key examples. One is the 1954 decision in Brown versus Board of Education. So that decision said that separate but equal schools is not constitutional, is not acceptable. We can't have racial segregation in this country. And that was a unanimous vote of the Supreme Court. If that would have been negotiated, in other words, if the plaintiffs and the defendants in the Little Rock School District would have negotiated the outcome, it would mean that black students in Little Rock could go to an integrated school. But for the rest of the country, racial segregation would still rule. So the Supreme Court decision that sets a global constitutional right was really important. A much more recent decision is the 2015 Obergefell decision, which said that as a constitutional 14th Amendment due process right, marriage equality would be the law of the land. And again, before 2015, in fact, various states already said marriage equality was fine, but other states said no, no, no. But because we went to the courts and it was a judicial decision, it established a level playing field or a standard playing field. So when you're thinking about an ADR process, and I would say most conflicts, right, don't go to the level of those deep rights. They're really about interests that are conflicting. And so mediation or negotiation or facilitation or an innovative process like the ones that Ken Feinberg designed can really be preferable. If you want to continue your learning about ADR, I want to urge you to watch the next video, which is what are the steps in the mediation process. In addition, if you want to improve your skills in negotiation and mediation, I urge you to think about taking a course with me at the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and ring the bell. I'm Bob Bordone, and thanks for negotiating together. Okay, you know you want to learn more about mediation. Click the next video.